Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I've got two replays in the Chinese Tier 8 Tech Tree Heavy Tank, the 110. Now if you do like the video, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe down below, as it really does help out the channel. And yes, the 110. It is a Tech Tree Heavy Tank on the way to the 113 or the WZ-111-5A. And it's a tank that's just a little bit underwhelming, in all honesty. It's one of those tanks that a lot of the tier 8s have progressed. They've all received buffs and that sort of stuff. This tank has in general as well. But it's one of those that a lot of the tier 8s around it are just generally better than it. It's not a terrible tank. You can perform in this vehicle, as you're going to see. But it's just one of those vehicles that is definitely, I would probably qualify it as underwhelming, to be honest. And it has two choices of guns, a 122mm gun and a 100mm gun. Now, the 122 is the top of the progression, and generally it's the more heavy, tanky gun. It's the gun that makes this tank feel that little bit nicer in terms of having that higher alpha. But to be honest, the 100mm gun, while it has a little bit less DPM, is generally that little bit more consistent. Why? Better velocity, better accuracy, slightly better in terms of aim time, stuff like that. Generally making the gun feel that bit more consistent than the 122mm gun, because the 122mm gun is very derpy and it can be so frustrating to use at times, if I'm honest. Now, this used to be the top gun in the tank. This used to be the gun that you would unlock, and this would be your end game gun until you got to the tier 9. But, like I say, they added that 122mm gun, and now it's a choice. You can go with the more consistent feeling gun, or you can go with the higher alpha. It's pretty much the way it goes. And this first replay, we're using the 100mm. So let's just talk about the 110 in general. So the tank has a 40km/h top speed, 15km/h reverse speed, 580 horsepower engine, which is 11.49 horsepower per ton ratio, which means it's a bit slow and sluggish up to its top speed, like a fair few heavy tanks are. And it will hit 40 eventually, but it's just a bit slow and sluggish getting there. Generally, you trundle along at about 33, 34, somewhere in that region. You've got 12% internal fire chance, which is on the low end of fire chances. If you get shot in the lower plate, you're probably getting set on fire, so be careful of that in your 110. But generally, it's a Chinese tank, and they do like getting set on fire, even if it has a low fire chance. You've got 30 degrees a second on the hull rotation speed, which means the tank does turn okay on its tracks. It's not slow, but it's not fast. It's just okay. Ground resistances that are not too bad for the vehicle, realistically, at 2.03, 1.01 and 0.92 on soft, medium and firm respectively. 486 metres of view range is fairly average for a tier 8 tank, so that's quite nice for the 110 as well. Means you can spot for yourself fairly decently in this vehicle. With a 31.62 degree a second turret rotation speed, that is slightly faster than the tracks, which is okay, but we have helped it out to get to that sort of level. And now we're on to the crux of this first replay, which is the 100mm. So you've got 6 degrees of gun depression with the 100mm, which is slightly better than the 5 you get on the 122. A 0.5 accuracy during rotation, which is really good. With the 1.76 accuracy during movement, means the aim circle isn't that big on this vehicle in general, meaning you are pretty much ready to go for firing the gun a lot of the time, which is very, very nice for the 110 in that regard. With a 0.28 accuracy at 100 metres as well, it means this gun is pretty damn accurate at range, which is one of the key aspects of picking this gun over the 122, is the general accuracy during rotation and movement, meaning the aim circle isn't too big, with the accuracy at 100 metres being very, very good, and a 2.12 second aim time, meaning it doesn't take too long to aim in general anyway to get this gun going. And because that aim circle is so small, it's pretty consistent in hitting those shots. Now, it's got a 7.29 second reload, which is 2.6k DPM, which is actually lower than the 122mm gun by 100, so you've got to bear that in mind, that you do have slightly lower DPM with a slightly lower alpha, which can be a bit poo. But generally, like I say, you are more consistent in hitting those shots because you've got better velocity, better accuracy and all that good stuff as well. 215 penetration on the standard AP, with 265 penetration on the premium APCR, which has 320 alpha with 950 metres a second shell velocity on the standard AP and 1,188 metres a second shell velocity on the premium APCR, which again, the velocity is slightly below average on the standard, but then pretty nice on the APCR, making, again, the gun handling just feel that little bit nicer when you're using it at range to be able to hit those shots. And it just all goes into the general consistent feel of this 100mm gun on the 110, which is why it's a perfectly viable option to pick, and why this gun, or should I say this tank, has two guns that you can choose from as you grind through. And like I say, this 100mm used to be the top gun, and then they added the 122mm gun with the nice stats, or the nicer stats in terms of the penetration and stuff, and it made it a pure choice. Now, as you can see in this first replay, we are having a pretty nice game so far in a tier 8 tank in a tier 10 game. We took the hit from the mouse, and I thought, you know what, we're just going to use our mobility, get around the mouse, because then we'll have some easy shots into his rear. If he wants to deal with me, he'll have to turn for my team, and then he will be giving his side armor to them, or he'll just feed me all of his hit points, which is basically what's happening. And we're up to 3.4k damage with 407 assistance damage. There's 3 tanks left on the enemy team, and they are over, well, 2 of them are over at C2, and 1 more is somewhere else that we don't quite know. So what do I run in terms of a crew and equipment in the old 110? Well, I'd run a fairly standard heavy tank setup, to be perfectly honest, in this vehicle. It's generally my generic heavy tank crew. Born leader, rapid reload, 6th sense, situational awareness, steady aim, snapshot, run and gun, the trap mechanic with rapid aim, the advanced loader, the gun stabilizer, and optics. Optics to be able to have the 483 meters of, or sorry, 486 meters of view range, so that I can spot for myself and then I don't get outspotted too easily. The gun stabilizer to keep that accuracy during rotation and movement down as low as possible, so that that aim circle is as small as it can be while I'm on the move or turning, and that means I'm always ready to get the gun going as quickly as humanly possible, meaning I make the most of my DPM. It just ups your effective DPM in the end, in that regard. The advanced loader to make the best out of the DPM in general, with all 3 gun perks just to help the gun so we can feel that consistency in the gun, and the rapid aim to make the turret reverse better than the tracks, as the tracks are that little bit faster if you don't help it, and as you all know by now, for me, it's one of my pet peeves. I like it when my turret can turn that little bit faster than the tracks, but it's one of those things that probably doesn't bother people at other times. So you could run something like armor hanging to reduce the amount of damage coming in, or run clutch braking to increase the track traverse of this vehicle. As like I say, it's not the fastest, but it's not the slowest. It's something that you could help out if you wanted to. It's really down to you and how you want to play the vehicle. So there's 1 tank left in our 110 in this game, and again, we don't particularly know where they are. It's a Conqueror. We're up to 3.7k damage with 407 assistance damage, which is where we're at after we managed to shoot that mouse, because we never got anywhere near those 2 heavy tanks as they got shut down, and that last Conqueror is somewhere knocking around. And this is where you got to take in stock of the mobility on the 110, as, like I say, it's not the fastest. We are sort of on a levelish playing field, or slightly going up and down ridge lines, and we've been sitting at about 32 to 33 kilometers an hour. We've gone slightly downhill, which has pushed us towards that 40, but any sort of hill, that low power to weight ratio is starting to rear its ugly head for Mr. 110, and it means that, yeah, you can just feel the slowness. But when you get that little bit of down speed, as you can see, we're going at 38 kilometers an hour, but this is what I'm saying, that you don't particularly hit 40 that often unless you go downhill, because you just have that lower power to weight, and it can make the tank feel that little bit sluggish and slow, and that can be annoying. And especially when you've got armor that just doesn't hold up that well either, it can be just one of those things. So we finished the game with the 3 kills, the 3.7k damage, the first class for that 1754 base XP, which is actually a pretty good game for a tier 8 heavy tank in a tier 10 game. We managed to make the most of what we had in the 110. We stayed hull down at some points, making it so that we could only shoot the Waffle E100 with our turret exposed, just kept the damage flowing, and then moved on and just supported where we needed to, because obviously that's what you need to be doing in any tank when you're down 2 tiers. You don't want to be the head of the, or the spearhead of the attack. You want to be supporting your team where you can, using what they have, their stronger assets, to be able to just keep pummeling damage out, and that way you'll win more games by just generally being helpful, rather than going, oh, I'm bottom tier, that's life, this sucks, and then just, you know, sitting at the back of the map and crying, which happens quite often as well. So you want to be helping out as much as you humanly can do. Obviously, there will be games where you just go, I can't do anything, and they literally poo all over you, and it's not a good time, that. So, yeah. Now we're on to the second replay. And we're on to the 122mm gun. We're on Prokhorovka. And actually, Prok will be a little bit more awkward for the 122mm gun because we actually lose a degree of gun depression with this vehicle. But having that higher alpha will be pretty nice for this vehicle. So, the 122mm gun, it's got a 0.54 accuracy during rotation, a 1.91 accuracy during movement. Now, the 0.54 accuracy during rotation is actually pretty good, but the accuracy during movement at 1.91 isn't quite as good, and it means that the aim circle will bloom out a wee bit more when you are on the move, and especially when you're getting up to speed. 5 degrees of gun depression, like I say, fairly awkward on a ridgeline, which is very Soviet-esque vehicle type. It means, like I say, you will struggle with 5 degrees of gun depression. You've got the 2.49 second aim time, which is where it's a bit more painful in terms of the gun, because that little bit more that the aim circle does bloom out, you will feel it because it'll take that little bit longer to aim in, as that aim time is significantly worse than the 100mm. 0.31 accuracy at 100 meters as well is also 0.3 worse than the 100mm, which means, again, you do feel that accuracy difference at distance at times in the 110. You've got 8.61 second reload, which is 2.7k DPM, so that is better than the 100mm. You do have better DPM, which is nice for this vehicle, with 217 pen on the standard AP, which is better than the 100mm, and 270 pen on the premium heat rounds, which again is better than the 100mm. With that 390 alpha, and that is quite nice. But the one thing that is way worse than the 100mm on this 122 is 800 meters a second shell velocity on the standard AP, which is really not very good, and 640 meters a second shell velocity on the premium heat rounds. So your AP rounds are very slow with that 800 meters a second. It means you have to give a lot of lead at distance to be able to hit your targets, compared to the 100mm, which has 950 on the standard. And the premium heat having 640 means you have to give a lot, and I mean a lot, of lead at distance to be able to hit those shots with that heat shell, and it makes the gun feel exceptionally derpy. And also because the velocity is that slow as well, the shells tend to loop a little bit out of the gun, meaning at times they actually hit armor plates at slightly weird angles. So when you have 270 pen, you think, I should be penning that, why did I bounce? Sometimes, it's because, especially when you're firing at distance, it's because the shell's arced at a weird way, and it means that you just bounce, which can be super duper frustrating. And it's where the inconsistency in this gun comes in, because the heat rounds can be frustrating in of themselves, because they're heat and they get absorbed by spaced armor, and sometimes when you can't quite get the shot into that front and someone gives you their side, and you're never really going to pen a tier 10 with the standard AP, you have to fire the heat rounds, and then you have their side, you fire out the side, it gets absorbed, and you sit there going, oh, but why? You know, it can be really frustrating. That velocity is really quite poor on this vehicle, on the 122mm gun, and that adds to the inconsistent feeling of the gun. So that's just something to bear in mind with it. Like I say, I feel like the 122 is probably my preferred gun for this tank, just for that more heavy tanky feeling in the gun, and having that higher alpha. But the 100mm gun is generally more consistent in pushing out the damage, just because the gun feels so much better, and especially if you're firing the premium APCR, it feels a hell of a lot better. So this game here on Prokhorovka, we've managed to get quite a bit of spotting down the 1-2 by taking the position at F3, which can be really handy. And we've also managed to keep pushing out quite a bit of damage. We're at nearly 3k spotting with 3.2k damage. With the 112 pushing across the 0 line, we're going to go and see if we can shoot the IS-2 and the medium tank down this 6 line, because from here I should be able to get shots at them quite easily and disrupt them as they are being pushed by my teammates. And also it means that they either have the choice of pushing into me or pushing into my teammates. So we fire the heat shell at the IS-2, sorry, and the IS-2 just went, lol, I see your 270 pen and I will bounce it on my turret front, which is, thanks game, is all I'm going to say. He fires a heat round through my upper plate because the pike nose on this vehicle makes the armor very awkward. Because we were pretty well angled against that IS-2, That meant that we actually devalued our armour on the front, and so he penned it really easily. It's one of those things, you have to be straight on to enemy vehicles to have the best effectiveness in your armour on the 110, and it's one of those things that the lower plate is actually really fat on this vehicle. It's really easy to pen for most vehicles as well, and the problem for you most of the time as well is the fact that you get set on fire all the time through that lower plate. So that is a pain with the 110 in general, with the feel of the armour, and it's just a bit of a downside for the vehicle, in all honesty. And it's one of the reasons why this tank does feel that little bit underwhelming, because you've got armour that doesn't truly hold up. It gets set on fire a lot. The 122mm gun is very derpy, which means that you miss a lot of opportunities for damage at times with this gun, as it can be super inconsistent at getting the damage just from getting random ass bouncers in it with it. But the 100mm also feels slightly underwhelming, because 320 alpha on a heavy tank is a bit realistically, but the accuracy of the gun is very, very nice. So it's one of those things. Like I say, for me personally, I think the 100mm is the most consistent gun, and it's probably the one that most people will do better with. But the 122mm gun for this tank is definitely the most satisfying gun for the tank, just because of having that heavy tanky alpha. So we finished that game with the 5 kills, 4.5k damage, 3k assistance damage, the ace tank of the Pascucci's, the high caliber, with the 2222, oh, that's super satisfying base XP there. 2222 base XP, really great game there for the 110 with that 122mm gun, and I hope that showed off both guns for the 110, just what it's like when you are using either of the guns for the vehicle. So as always, everybody, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.
A great success!